Thank you very much. Once again, this is my second appearance. I have been considering this particular subject for the last 3-4 years, and when this opportunity came, I thought that I would share my ideas with all of you. I will begin this lecture with a reference to Shamian Island, Guangzhou in China. Shamian Island is a very peaceful retreat for the crowds of this sprawling metropolis. It's about 900 meter by 300 meter, swept by the Pearl River, and it had been also a colonial city which ultimately became free in the 1940s. If someone strolls around its shaded streets, one may be struck by the sporadic architectural display and sculptured structures. One of its most noticeable displays is a curious bronze sculpture that you can see over there. One of its most noticeable displays is the curious bronze sculpture showing a line of metallic children forming a metallic lady bodies. And noticeably, there is a gap in the line. So there is a continuity of the metallic structures. The lady bodies is there, followed by a group of children clasping hands with each other, creating at the same time a gap. And why is that gap? The gap is meant for a human being to enter into the line, to clasp the hands with others, with the children. So any human may enter the line, clasp the children's hands, and be a part of this post-human world. The travelers find it exquisite to enter this architectural challenge, to accept this invitation to be part of this world beyond Homo sapiens. I will begin actually this paper or this address with some weird questions. Let us try to take stock of such weird questions. How many words do we cope with, or transgress, or review, or be recursive? Such integrations actually generate a multiform structuration. The traditionally endorsed hierarchic structure has a distinctive kind of pattern which shows a rise from the insensate, meaning the stones, the pebbles, the bricks, the sands, etc., rising upward to the vegetable, the world of the plants, rising further up to the animals, and finally ending with the so-called crown of things, human. So this is the kind of traditional hierarchic structure which has been created by the traditional systems. This governs the traditional ontological perception of humanism. There is always a tendency to move from multiformity to uniformity, with man as a doctrinal approximation to perfection, thereby positing an unquestionable supremacy over all other forms of creation. So man is the supreme, creation, the perfect creation of God. So therefore I am questioning what are then the proximate patterns of tools that are used to establish the anthropocentric governance, a governance that envisions an intellect-ridden post-apocalyptic world order. The history of ideas, as evidenced by the early 20th century Italian philosopher Benedetto Croce, who examines the history of ideas as a continuum in relation to actio, action, and praxis, practice. In other words, he seemed to be working under the neo-Hegelian sense of totality. I'm really challenging this idea of totality for a long time. This neo-Hegelian sense of totality, especially explicit in the views of history and enlightenment. The totalitarian philosophy of humanism always, even since the pre-Socratic traditions, centered itself on axiomatically accepted concept of the imaging of man, the Homo sapiens, the fixed, ideologically endorsed principle of humanism always sought a normativity of appreciation through opposition and balance. Moving away from the pre-Socratic notion of preemptive divinity as the primum mobile, the Hellenic as well as the Renaissance and Enlightenment world order sought solace through the centrality of man. The centrality of man working or operating through intellect, reason, and perfection. I'm referring here to a professor from the Vrije University Amsterdam. He is Marius Garbantu. He wrote an essay, Strong Artificial Intelligence and Theological Anthropology, One Problem, Two Solutions. This was published this year, 2022. Here, he contains on the book of Genesis problematic of Homo imago Dei, the image of God, man created in the image of God. So God is preconceived, the preemptive idea is that God is perfect. And man is created in the image of God, meaning man is also perfect. I'm really challenging this idea of totality. That man is everything, man is everywhere, man is total. So I'm talking about this. How do we account for the envisioning of the image of God? Despite the rejection of preemptive or a priori functionality of God's supremacy, who is taken as the icon of supreme intelligence, has a recursive pattern through the creation of the idea of God recreated in man. But how? In theological and socio-political strata, a hierarchic design has always been, traditionally, been improvised. Why has it been improvised? Man as perfect, man as intellectual, intellect-reading. Why has it been created? Now, in theological and social-political strata, we find that there is always a tendency to bifurcate this. The perfect man and the imperfect man. The intellectual man and the non-intellectual man. So, it tries to bifurcate the Homo sapiens, man into oppositional divide. The Augustinian ideology, I'm referring to St. Augustine, the Augustinian ideology as enunciated in his book Civitas Dei, the City of God, or the Thomist doctrine, I'm referring to St. Thomas Aquinas, the Thomist doctrine as illustrated in Summa Theologica, the summit of theology, or More's Utopia even. There is, if you read it very properly, then you will see there is constant attempt to divide man. How? Man divided through two distinctive principles. Man, on the one hand, is governed by intellective will, the intelligence, and again at the same time, man governed by appetitive will, the will of desire, lowly desires, without intellect. So there is a creation of this kind of division in the so-called perfect man. As a result, man, even as a triumph of humanism, comes to be divided and subject to sectarianism. Humanism, as celebrating intellect, rationalism, truth, etc., comes to be further modularized and totalitarian. The book of nature theory, which is very popular from the Renaissance till the 19th century, the book of nature theorized in Renaissance and classical European thought has been used to demystify the blurred images and comprehend it through the ideals of perfection. Nature is therefore order. Nature is not this kind of nature, the trees, the rivers and all that. Nature actually symbolizes order. So nature is therefore order and symmetry, conceived in terms of planetary systems, human existence, and the vegetal world. The perfect planetary movement, as discussed, for the literature students I am saying this, that it has been discussed, the perfect planetary movement has been discussed, a sort of theological discussion in Milton's Paradise Lost, Book 4. It's a discussion between Adam and Eve, where they are looking at the planetary movements and are trying to consider the perfect movement of the planets. So that becomes a symbolic design of God's perfection. The human adherence to social order, as you notice in the 17th and 18th century social satires, where the point of satire arises because of the deviation from perfection and order. So everywhere, humanism is creating the facade, but at the same time, there is bifurcation and division. So it is going on in this way. Even the perfect system movement in the vegetal world, all of these are regarded as modes of perfection, so characteristic of humanistic thought. But there is imperfection, there is disorder, there is lack of symmetry in the vast range of human strata. So what to do about that? The explanation of humanism by virtue of perfection and order seems to be inadequate. Naturally, the question of imago Dei, man created in the image of God, that triumph of creation, and that has been so wonderfully put forward and theorized through ages traditionally. Naturally, this imago Dei, the image of God concept, seems to be completely inadequate. It is in terms of humanism's inherent inadequacy, deviation and division. The triumph of humanism's intellect and perfection, therefore to some extent is fictitious, because it fails to go with the social stratum that is not leveled as intelligentsia. If you can't really match it with the layers of intelligence, then it is not acceptable. Noam Chomsky, for instance, in one of his very old books on language, published in 1977, seems to show this distrust of this fabricated constructedness of intellect. I'm quoting from him. One must be careful not to give the impression that only intellectuals equipped with special training are capable of such analytical work. In fact, that is just what the intelligentsia would often like us to think, that pretend to be engaged in an esoteric enterprise unacceptable to simple people. Similar in solitude actually began to be apparent. Because actually, this move towards posthumanism is not very new. That is what I want to substantiate. It started much earlier, and now we are in this juncture. So similar in solitude began to be apparent with Chomsky's contemporaries. In 1966, Foucault wrote a book called The Order of Things, where he made a very significant remark. So I'm quoting that remark. It is comforting. It is comforting, however, and a source of profound relief to think that man is only a distant invention, a figure not yet 2 centuries old, a new wrinkle in our knowledge. Please remember these phrases, which seems to be rather very enigmatic. He says that man is only a recent invention, only 2 centuries old. And then he says, and a new wrinkle in our knowledge, and that he will disappear. This man will disappear again as soon as that knowledge has discovered a new form. Just consider this wonderful, at the same time enigmatic, paradoxical statement. He says man is a recent invention. Is it really acceptable? He says man is just 2 centuries old. Is that acceptable? In fact, he is creating a kind of landmark that means the enlightenment, that means the gradual assumption of man in terms of intellect. So that's why he said that this. So man is not just a biological man. He is talking about a concept. Man is just a concept. So man as a concept, as an intellectual man, emerged as a recent invention, only 2 centuries old therefore. And that's why he says, when our knowledge further extends, there will be a new form. That means a new concept of man. So man's emergence as yet 2 centuries old may seem to be misleading. In fact, he fixes on enlightenment at the beginning of the new man, a product of humanity which is subject to change as a new epistemic order which evolves and conduces to the birth of man in a new form. Unknowingly, perhaps, Foucault foreshadows the development of posthumanism, clearly marking 3 stages. Humanism showing man as just 2 centuries old, which is very, very much intellect-ridden, and transhumanism, unraveling procedures of involvement through knowledge, and finally it all culminates in the celebration of posthumanism through a new form. It's also worth noting Max More's book. Max More also is a very important critic. He wrote a book called, not at all associated with posthumanism, but he contributes indirectly. Max More's book, The Principles of Entropy. It is a mode of entropy. It's a mode of, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy which shows a distrust of stasis, fixity, It is a mode of evolving values directed to the development of man. It therefore shows that there is need to redefine the concept of man, the idea of man, to reassess the evolving patterns and tools used thereof. With every movement there have been some kinds of tools. And what are those tools? External tools for intellectually oriented world are essential for the endorsement or approval of that world. In the world of humanism, the central exigency tools were language, writing, speaking, etc., corroborated in terms of language as a matter of symbolic ontology, writing as a methodology of visual imagination, and speaking as a problematic of vocality. The exercise of tools has also an evolving transience that changes and replaces the earlier models through new technical forms. Thus, this generates new exercises, new tensions, and even new surprises. I share with you my experience of watching the film Terminator 2 long back. I was invited by the American Center in the 1990s, and they were actually holding a festival of sci-fi films. So therefore, I had an opportunity to see the Terminator 2, and there certain things became very noticeable. There the hero, Schwarzenegger, actually is, and early in the film, is able to destroy this is the adversary robot, which has come to destroy the human world, and Schwarzenegger is the savior robot who has come to protect the agencies of safe uptaking of the world. So this is going on. He is being destroyed by the nitrogen, and he breaks down. He collapses, and you can see that he is being destroyed. And then you will see that he will be turned into a liquid. So it's all shattered. The adversary robot is shattered. It seems it is turned into a liquid.
So this is Mercury Man. This is Mercury Man.
We don't have much time. Let's go.
So I just showed this to you. So Schwarzenegger actually is destroying the adversary robot, the all-performing adversary robot. It's quite early in the film, and while I was watching this film, I thought that ultimately this dangerous adversary robot is destroyed. But it's a different kind of concept that was emerging even in 1991. The traditional epistemic model shows that a form, the human form, which is shattered and liquidated, cannot integrate itself into a body. But it is here that the liquid reintegrates itself into a body form. So as early as 90s of the last century, the traditional ideology of form as body comes to be interrogated. In other words, the idea of man as a composite of intellect and body, etc., comes to be completely redesigned through metaform, through meta-body. So the posthuman philosophy perhaps began to visualize a world of new form of man in pursuit of new intellectual model that diversifies, disarticulates, demodularizes, which is a negation even of postmodernist multiplicity, pluralism, and open-endedness. The Derridian ideal of negating structured, fixed codes of meaning perhaps is the first inkling into the new world where epistemic and ontology may not be necessarily compatible with each other. It's a new vision of dequalising that invokes larger modes of, higher modes of expansionist model. The model of, as they say, artificial intelligence, AI. The AI thesis was first developed in 1950 by John McCarthy in a workshop organized at Dartmouth. Despite this fast invigorating emergence of the body of literature on artificial intelligence, there is still apprehension about its capacity to replace the human intelligence as a whole. So critics contend that artificial intelligence as a replacement category is still confined to certain specific mechanical dynamisms like games, like images, like voice recognition, like translation, navigation, etc., all of these, but all superficial. The surface structure. That's why it says, the critic Gurvantu refers to the study of Miller, who believed that it is hardly ever possible to see the maturation, the proper maturation of artificial intelligence till 2040. It should also be noted that Ihab Hassan, in his keynote address in the International Symposium on Postmodern Performance at the Center for 20th Century Studies at the University of Wisconsin in 1976, first coined the term posthumanism. In 1976, this was later published as a paper in a book called Performance, Presence and Play in the Postmodern World. While generally commenting on performance and postmodernism, Ihab Hassan introduces the concept of posthumanism by constructing the mythotext of Prometheus, the hired bringer, the knowledge bringer. The mythotext of Prometheus, he inflects on the revisionary level of the Western philosophical tradition. This comes to be continued by another very important critic, Donna Haraway's thesis of posthumanism as generated through cyborg science and technology. It seems that contemporary theorists on posthumanism are centered on what I prefer to term andro-machine hybridity. It's a kind of hybridity, a mix of andro-machine. So it is the combination of this that creates a new kind of genre, a new kind of formation of man. This is wonderfully noticed in 1978 studio album The Man Machine by the German electronic music band Kraftwerk. It was 1978, just consider what they... Yes, please go on, then I will comment. Or July. Okay. So it was perhaps the first attempt to produce a culture machine. It was for the first time that this new band from Germany created the concept of culture machine with the hybrid employment of synthetic pop, rock, electronic body music, etc. If I could play this on, then you would be able to understand how it really goes. Recent sci-fi culture also seems to indirectly inflect on the gradual emergence and development of posthumanism. This cultural praxis seeks to suggest the erasure of man. So therefore, it is a kind of new cultural praxis which seems to suggest, and I don't agree with that, the eraser of man. Look at this very challenging comment made by Professor Haraway. Now, Professor Haraway says, so Professor Haraway makes a very typical comment. I don't agree with that, but let us read it. By the late 20th century, our time, a mythic time, we are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. In short, we are cyborgs. The cyborg is our new ontology. This is an overstatement to some extent and a negation of the functions of human ontology. It seems to be a sudden rupture in the epistemic linearity. To my mind, posthumanism is never epistemic order. The development of an eschatological intellection. Posthumanism is a new epistemic order. The development of an eschatological intellection that envisions the new form, the andro-machine hybrids, not in terms of physical organism. Haraway's dream of chimeras or cyborgs is nothing but the invention of a new theoretical fabrication. It is in fact a new brand of psi-philosophical movement towards the formation of a new critical approach. Thank you very much.